Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I like to start with the recording so we can get that like juicy, general, vivacious hello.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, so um are you in Santa Fe as well?
I am. Yeah, I moved here in 2016. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. So
Yeah.
have you been designed for a while then or pretty new to it or
No, I say I'm on my fourth year. So I've had the third year anniversary and now I'm up into fourth. Yeah. So I've done analyst training, I've done all the foundational courses, been seeing clients. But I was a spiritual coach, or not, but, and I was had spiritual coaching clients. So, and kind of what we were messaging about a little bit. I've been in the personal development space for a long time and was in a lot of different container work. And so, all of that exploration, I had a podcast for a while called Dare to Listen, where I had people on to talk about their modalities. Yeah. So family constellations, five rhythms, the body movement system or meditation. Yeah. Tantra. Um, yeah. Past life has talked about, but I never had a person who that's their thing. So it was
Oh,
just kind
okay.
of things that dabbled in. Yeah.
Yeah, so you haven't done one yet?
Well, it's hard to say. Like I've worked with many healers. Like one example that's strongest in my mind is I was doing caring for two dogs, and something happened with the dog. They were bit by a rattlesnake, and I like superheroed them um to the vet, got them the care that they needed, and then I got back to the house and I was like, they're gonna like condemn me. They're gonna be so mad at me. And so when I worked with a healer around that experience, he was able to tap into a past life where I don't know, I think 1400s, but I don't know. And so I've had like little snippets of this life where I was kind of put out and sacrificed and all those. I saw your breath as you were kind of digesting the information. Was that a lot to take in?
Well, yeah, it's just it's interesting when when you are getting a past life from someone else because in the session like what I do
Ah.
you're going through it yourself, so you're doing your own channeling of so
Mm,
you're not necessarily always reliving it per se,
sure.
but you're definitely getting more of the visuals, so you can always go deeper into those things, and it's really interesting because there's a sense of when somebody else tells you, it's kind of like there's
Mm.
always that sense of maybe a little bit of uncertainty, where it's like, okay, yeah, well, this, but with this, and there's still maybe a little bit of uncertainty the first time that you actually go through a session yourself, like an actual
Uh,
set, but it's still more where you're actually the one receiving the information. You're seeing things, you're getting that information. It's so much more you can connect to it because you're like, and that's when it can become very powerful because you'll have these emotional releases. And sometimes people will say it's like HD or they're really there. And
hmm.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, you should absolutely try one time if you're, wanting to explore more into it. And
Well, I have actually done things of that nature. There was a meditation school in California. I don't know if you know the name Samuel Sagan. Sagan. Anyway, his school is called Clair Vision, and their body of work was accessing the samskaras. And so it was when I was in, I guess, receiving space. So I was in that, laying down meditation. And it was a week long of let's go, let's look at those samskaras. And so somebody would support me in the process. And oh, did I travel? And to what you're speaking to, it was me going to these different
ah,
places. Yeah. I
well,
mean,
and
even like wild ones, like where I was like, there are giants and they are taller than the Empire State Building. And I was like, I am not on drugs. I don't know what's happening. And this is what I'm feeling. So was it metaphorical? Was it legit? Don't know.
exactly. Well, that's great. So you have really had an experience like that then. What did they call that? What was the modality or the technique called?
Yeah. So they refer to it as inner space therapy, IST. And so I was then, so it was a bit of like toggle. So then we would shift, and then I would be the person who, where my hands would kind of go over the person's physical body and then like sense where I felt the draw was. And because the thought was to put, and I'm interpreting this through my brain, they might teach it differently, but it's to put the fingers over or some kind of body part like on where the attention is drawn. And then that can be like that person, so the person who's laying down, access or portal into, okay, what's here? What are the layers? What do we need to explore? Or what does the person who's laying down explore? And then the person who's over top, who's got the sense of the samskar or the entry point, would have their own process of like, guiding them. What do you feel? What do you sense? Oh, I'm sensing this, so that there's kind of a little bit of a collaborative effort of feeling into the space. So inner space therapy. Yeah.
Okay. Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So you've done quite the work. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. These modalities are just very advanced when it comes to that. And yeah, I just love working in that. And they call
Yeah.
it hypnosis. Essentially, it's an altered state, and when you're in
Hmm.
that altered state, it's like, yeah, you're not on anything, but you're having an experience. It's powerful.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Well, I love that we dove, like, we're in it. We're here. All right. Well, here we are. We've done a little bit of logistical, hey, how are you kind of conversation, and the official welcome to this interview. This is the High Desert Human Design Conference pre-conference interview with Alex. And Alex, can you pronounce your last name for me? I want to make sure I don't goof it up.
Yeah, it's Negrete.
Ah, beautiful, beautiful. And yeah, how I like to frame these conversations is first with a little of orienting who you are. So I love to do that with your chart up. So I'll move us to the next slide. And so typically what I tend to ask here is, for us in a leady conversation is, how did you and human design find each other? And if you want to weave in the components of like your epic transition through life experiences, go for it. Wherever you want to go.
Absolutely. That's such a great lead in because
Mm.
I feel like from everyone that I've met, human design has always come in at a major life transition. It's
Uh-huh.
always like when it's coming in, there's a massive shift going on.
Mhm.
And that's absolutely what was going on for me. So, yeah, so just a little bit of my background before I got into spirituality and holistic healing and everything. I was, in high school. This is back in, I'm going to age myself, of course, but back in 2007,
Mhm.
actually 2006 is when I first created a YouTube channel.
Ah.
So YouTube came about 2005, and I was about mid-year 2005, and if anyone was remembers back then, it didn't start getting popularity until about 2006, 2007. It was kind of just initially just a place to post videos and just host some videos. It wasn't a platform that we know today where there's creators and everyone's using it. And so I would make these goofy, videos. I was in multimedia class, and I would, YouTube was just again a website where you just host the video. So I just, would post them on there to send to my, friends and different things like that. And I started to notice, and that was in 2006. I started to notice in 2007 that they started to get some views,
Mm.
and people started to comment them and things like that. And yeah, and I was in multimedia class while all this was happening. And then in short order, Google had bought YouTube. Google had rolled out the partner program, and now YouTubers, there was these things called YouTubers, people
Uh-huh.
called YouTubers that were making six figures.
Mm.
And yeah, and I was just like, you're telling me that I could do this for a living, and I was already posting videos and they were already getting some views. So I just committed to it 100%. Started created a new channel called Keep the Heat and started posting comedy music videos and
Ah.
comedy, like almost like Saturday Night Live type skits, things like that, just goofy videos. And yeah, they just really started to take off. And within 2 to 3 years, I was one of the top 100 biggest
Mm.
YouTubers in the entire world. Actually,
Gotcha.
at my peak, I was number 84. And I had moved to Los Angeles, and this was still in the early days, but at that time, I mean, starting to make six figures was a big deal. Especially I was 21 at the time and was just had more income coming in than I knew what to do with. When I would go, and I was in LA, when I would go to, Santa Monica or out where there was a lot of people, people would come up to me, ask to take my picture with me. And I was living at the type of life where I was really doing anything that I wanted, which was pretty amazing in a lot of ways. Although I also recognize that when I look at pictures of myself back then, I was really kind of, drinking a lot, and I look in my
Mm.
eyes and I was kind of just checked out, which was very interesting. But then, this was a big part of my story that, it's always kind of shocks people initially, but it was actually such a blessing. So I got diagnosed with cancer around
Mm.
the same time. And that was the catalyst that got me on this path of looking into holistic healing and all this type of stuff because I had everything that most people would work
Right.
their lives wishing to get. And I realized that it wasn't doing it for me. I wasn't happy at all. And I was like, something was missing. And I was like, whoa, if I have all this and something's missing, I mean, what's going on? What's really going on here?
Right.
And and yeah, and so that made me kind of take a step back and be like, I gotta figure this stuff out. And thankfully I had a few YouTube channels at that point that were doing pretty well. So I actually got to just truly take a step back and kind of find myself. And over the course of the next 2 years, so that was 2011, from 2011 to 2013, I, as far as YouTube and some of that work was concerned, I did some of the best work that I've ever done,
Mm.
just because I was really coming from a different place of just truly enjoying it. But deep down, I was still lacking purpose. I was like, well, is this what I'm supposed to be doing here? It's just creating videos, and so I was looking for something more.
Mm.
And I had a friend at that time who he kept coming around with DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine. If you've heard of ayahuasca, anyone out there,
Ah.
it's right. It's the same thing that's in ayahuasca. It's called the spirit molecule. It comes from plants, but our brains also secrete it. And so I had a friend coming around with that, and I'd always, every time he would come around with it, I would say, no, I felt fear around it and I just didn't want to explore that. But at this time, 2013, I was just desperate. I was desperately needing something. And at that point, I had a one-way ticket booked to Sweden, and I
Mm.
was just planning on just traveling the world for indefinitely, and just getting into whatever and just being like, well, if I die, I die, whatever. I don't feel like I have a purpose anyway. So, I'm just
Ah.
gonna have as much fun as possible and just see what happens and whatever. But, the universe had other plans for me because then, I do that and I try the DMT. And I've got four friends in the room with me while I'm doing it. I'm the only one that's doing it this time. And so I, take, one hit of it, and then I start seeing these beings appearing behind my friends,
Uh-huh.
and I'm starting to connect with them telepathically, and they're communicating with me, telling me to tell my friends that they're guardian angels. And so I'm totally coherent. I would say I
Yeah.
was extremely conscious, super conscious. It wasn't like I was out of it. I was very, very present. And so I'm talking to them, telling them what's going on. And keep in mind, before this, I'm not spiritual at all. I mean,
Mm.
I always wanted to believe. I grew up in a Christian sort of household, but I never fully bought into all of it. And I didn't want to say that I had a personal relationship with anyone that I couldn't actually see. So I just, was not going to buy. But it was so interesting because it was so foreign to me at that time, but at the same time, it was so familiar. It was like, oh yeah, this is what it's all about. Yeah, I forgot. Now I'm remembering.
Uh-huh.
And when I would look into my friend's eyes, and then we would make eye contact, and I would see these auras around them, which
Uh-huh.
I had kind of known about auras or heard about them, but never would have seen them. But it was bright as the sun. I mean, very bright and vivid, different colors. And when we would lock eyes for about 5 seconds, they had to hold a gaze. I would see almost like it was like a sci-fi movie, a projector screen coming out the back of their head, and I would see different aspects of their life, almost like I could kind of move it around and stuff.
Huh.
And I look back and I'm like, okay, I believe that what I was seeing were the Akashic records, because in certain
Mm.
ways, what I'm doing right now with past life regression and quantum hypnosis, quantum healing is sort of Akashic records work. It's Akashic records keeping, like keeping of people's records, being able to access them. And I don't access them myself. I help others access their own records essentially.
Mm.
So that was just a completely wild experience, especially for me at that time, going from 0 to 100. And in short order after that, it was like experience after experience after experience. I had another experience where a few days later was just laying in bed, you
Mm.
know, by myself, and I'd only done that once, and that was it. And I felt these beings in the room with me. They were connecting with me, telling me who I was in a past life, having me go to
Mm.
Google and look up these things, and had a bunch of interesting mystical experiences where one of my like I had a birthmark that was on my neck. If you look at my childhood photos, there was always this big birthmark on my neck. It completely disappeared within a
Mm.
matter of 2, 3 days. And I noticed it in the mirror and I was like, whoa, like where is that birthmark? And I had heard that birthmarks were connected to past lives. Well, sure enough, I go to this person's that I was told who I was in a past life to see how they died. Sure enough, after doing some research, they died in
Wow.
a plane crash and they were identified by something on their neck. So,
Wow.
and then there was another few things that happened that just kind of confirmed it for me. And it still took me 10 years to fully accept that, but I accepted it enough. Well, around this time, I was also learning about all these things, just getting, I look at it as one big download. I got downloaded with sacred geometry. I got downloaded with
Mm.
astrology. I got downloaded with human design. And I bought a stack of books like this big. This is 2013. So whatever human design books were around at that
Right.
time, there weren't many, I had bought. And I started to get into it, but I didn't it was so overwhelming to me because the only books really was the black book, there was the white book, and the way that Ra writes is very, especially for a 21-year-old who's just, and this
Yeah.
is 20 teens, early days, was like, okay, I don't know if I'm ready for this quite yet, you know? Uh,
Totally.
so yeah. So anyway, so that's kind of the origin story of how human design came into my life. But it really wasn't until much later. So 2021, I say between the years of 2013 to 2021, I was kind of getting my spiritual doctorate. I hadn't really started working in
Mm.
space. I was still in 3D doing social media, corporate, startup, different things like that. But 2021, I moved to Austin, Texas. I committed to jumping into a spiritual career. And yeah, it was literally right after I moved that I was exploring Austin, just a new city that I had moved to. And then I had stopped at this kava bar, which is a kava is a type of, I don't really know how you describe it, but yeah. And then I met the woman there who was working, and then she was telling me about human design. And I was like, human design, I got into that in 2013, but and then, but maybe it's time for me to get back into it. So she gave me a whole reading. And so
Mm.
yeah, it just really opened my eyes to everything that I probably could have got into back in the day, but connected with me being a projector and all of this. So I jumped into the Austin human design community. At that point, it was
Mm.
just starting. So I went to our first meetup. And since then, I've just been really active in the human design community. I host some of the events here in Austin at my
Mm.
place. So we're hosting some pool parties. So I've got a pool party coming up for the whole human design community next week. But other
Gotcha.
than that, yeah, just you're really cranking away at the spiritual work. I got into hypnosis, learned quantum healing hypnosis technique, Dolores Cannon's technique, and adapted it, and have now just created my own business, created a nonprofit, and just building
Mm.
this and mission to just get this out to the world to help people connect with their true selves and develop their own inner knowing and well-being.
Beautiful. I'm struck with a couple of questions. Are you open for me asking you questions as they might relate?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, the first thing, the strongest question that I have is, the astrological cycles of your Saturn return. Like, I was curious what the timeline of your Saturn return was with your storyline. Like, was that around the cancer diagnosis timeline?
So this is where you're going to have to help me out because with the astrology and even with human design, like I have an understanding and I'm, somewhat a lot more with human design than astrology. But I'm not too familiar on all the timelines with that. With astrology, I'm more connected to my, sun sign, moon sign, rising sign, north node. I'm not too
Hmm.
familiar with the timelines and all that. So what timeline would that have been? What
Well,
age?
so I've got you in the system. So the system. I've got you in Maya Mechanics. So I can look at your cycle dates, and I can share screen if you like, and I want to be, respectful
Yeah,
of your
that'll be
date
fun.
privacy.
Oh, I'm
Like,
completely. I don't
okay,
mind with any of. Yeah, you could
okay,
share, and
okay.
yeah, and that'd be fun. Yeah, because I'll be learning as we go. But I'll let you know. Yeah, around this time, this was happening, and it all connects. That's the amazing. That's what I love about human design is I always call human design astrology on steroids because it
Uh,
just when you look into it, everything connects, and you can put the pieces together on everything.
so Saturn return for you is January 2019. So it feels like that was much later. So the cancer diagnosis was earlier.
Okay, so January 2019. So what were you mentioning that would have might have aligned with or
Well, I was just curious. So let me just give the context of how I understand and work with the cycles. So these first three cycles are like the major ones. So Saturn return, any of the cycles, how I think of it is whatever was that like grounding foundational, this is my life, something shifts it. So cancer diagnosis is the big like, whoa, we need to reassess. We need to look at and see what component of my life needs a revisit, needs to be bounced, like, relationships, jobs, identity, like all those sorts of things. And the other thing, just to kind of ping, when you talked about, peace out, I'm going to Sweden and we'll see where I go, like that to me sounds like a self-projected projector.
okay.
Maybe, maybe not. That's my first interpretation. And I'll go come back to the cycles because there's more layers we can go to. But here's what's so interesting to me about you, friend, is you have 38 four times. Like, have you tracked that?
No, no. See, I'm so excited about this, and thank you so much because I'm the first time I'm hearing this.
Okay. Well, and I'm happy to say whatever this conversation is. And, this is going to be like a little drop in the bucket. So there's like, these are the rabbit holes that you can jive down to if you want to. First of all, do you know gate 38?
No,
Okay. Are you ready? Are you ready?
I'm I'm ready for this. Yes, and all the rabbit holes, let me know, and I'll go on these because yeah, this is interesting. I'm excited to learn more. But yeah, whatever you notice, let me know.
Yeah. So gate 38 is the gate of the fighter. So if you think of a boxing ring, and I'm getting chills all over my body as I'm talking about this. There's something here potentially for you to, anyway, there's something here. It's like, what boxing match do I want to get in and fucking like, wah, like, I'm gonna like go toe to toe or whatever. But it's that like pressure to fight or not. And so I'm curious about your tracking of that as it relates to your life's trajectory. Because the other element that's interesting about the fact that it's here four times, like that just says whenever a gate is activated four times, it's like the spirit world is like, yeah, we've got a few things for you to look at with this one. And so then you can look at the placement. So Neptune, if you've studied Neptune, but Neptune is the veil, and it tends to be a very spiritual place. So in your speaking about your life, it felt a little, I heard, well, what am I really here for? What am I wanting to do? And so if we overlay that with the gate of the fighter, I hear something there. Does that resonate for you? Do you hear something for
Yeah,
yourself?
100%. Absolutely. Yeah, because everything that's been connected to my sense of purpose or what I'm here to do, my drive, things like that, there's always been an aspect of fighting. And it's been
Mm,
confusing at times because when I was, starting with YouTube, it was just, yeah, it was like people in I was growing so fast and it was almost like people in the YouTube community didn't like some of the stuff, some of the
mm,
stuff I was doing. And so it was almost like they were kind of like I've just noticed there's this idea of like pitchforking and in some ways it's like I'm always trying to fight against something like even now with the quantum healing
mm.
hypnosis community, it's like there's certain things that are just it's almost like this feeling of needing to fight against old systems to
Ah,
bring some new systems into place. And like sometimes it feels like I have to be that because in the beginning, like, the being one of the first YouTubers, back in the day that kind of paved the way, it was like you kind of have to take the fall to create
mm,
something new. Like I've kind of always been in that energy of just paving the way and Um, an extreme example, and I'm not, necessarily comparing, but the extreme example that comes to mind is like, Jesus, for example, right? Jesus
Uh-huh.
has the way and, he dies for it or whatever. But for any one of us that's called to sort of pave new roads or go against systems, it's that can come with it. And I feel like that's, to me, is what it speaks to, is just always kind of fighting against these systems to create something new that's ultimately with the pure intention of helping. But yeah.
Well, and now we're maybe going to refer to the other planets. So the other planet is Saturn. And so Saturn could be considered the teacher. Saturn return, it's teaching us what needs to shift. And there's multiple Saturn returns if one lives that long. So anyway, there's these like overlayers of this gate 38 happening twice in your Neptune and twice in Saturn. So there could be something there to explore. So it's almost like with that Saturn overlay, it's like, well, what am I here to learn about being taught which is worth the fight and which isn't? Because the other layer of this is, anytime there's a gate and it's pointing at its counterpart, the channel. And so this channel, 2838, is considered to be the channel of struggle. And so what that's about is somebody with this channel is like, well, what am I really wanting to struggle in this life for? What's worth it to really struggle for? And so your energy potentially could be distracted by life purpose, because that's more the angle of gate 28, which I heard you in some of what you were speaking at. And so when we look at your life force activation, so life force activation is anytime two parts of a channel, handshake is kind of how I talk about it. I don't know how to do a handshake visually, but so you've got 1020, which is a very powerful channel. So you've got life force energy that's kind of pointing towards your spleen. It's pointing toward 57, which is your intuition. So I'm naming that because these are all in human design, the individuality stream, right? So you've got this, what am I fighting for so that I can potentially, because all energy wants to move out through the throat, is coming up to the gate 20. So that could be a storyline of consideration because the spleen is all about well-being, health, survival. So all of these kind of speak to potentially what you might notice with gate 38.
Absolutely. Yeah, that resonates, and that definitely aligns with a lot of it's constantly aligning with what is always coming to me about just this constant evolution of life purpose and also my sense of individuality versus the collective. I feel like in certain ways I resonate more with the collective as a soul, but here
Mm,
as a human, I'm here to essentially apparently have an individual experience. So I do question a lot that alignment with purpose, and it's interesting because a big thing that I would say I'm sort of graduating towards is thinking of purpose less in terms of what am I specifically as an individual here to accomplish, and more about ultimately these broader themes of what are we all here to accomplish? What is our ultimate,
yeah.
all of our purpose? And I've got a couple of them, which essentially is one, I believe that we're all here to know ourselves more deeply, to
Yep.
develop a self-knowing, because we all are unique individuals and
Hmm.
our purpose is to know ourselves more deeply
Hmm.
uh, in certain ways. And so, and then the other is ultimately my belief is to contribute to the end of suffering. And so when you think about what is the opposite of suffering, well, that's well-being. And so our purpose is to always come, my belief is to come into a greater sense of well-being. And so if I'm moving in a direction where I'm being more well, I'm, in essence, actually removing the barriers that stop me
Mm,
from being well already, coming into deeper sense of well-being, coming into a deeper sense of self-knowing, then it seems like that's what I'm here to do. But to your point, it's like, where is the fight in that? And that's where I think, what I'm learning from you as well is the Saturn comes in, because the
mm,
Saturn, the teacher is saying, well, you don't have to fight for that. You
mm,
just have to be.
mm,
And so
mm.
it can sometimes maybe for me feel a little purposeless if there's not something to fight towards because I'm like,
Ah,
right? It's like, oh, you're telling me all I have to do is just exist. It's like, what's the point in that? You know?
right.
But apparently that's the path. And so
Yeah.
It's
Well,
real.
and what's also interesting going back to, the Neptune, and this is one of the rabbit holes that you might find um nourishing or curious for yourself, is so Neptune is veiling it. It's like it's hiding kind of what is the fight or not until the moment is there and it's like, and here it is. So it's almost like it can't be a mental exploration of it. It's like it lands maybe in the quantum field. I feel awkward saying that because I don't know that I always understand what the quantum field is. But my point is like, the yellow brick road lands in front of us when that veil lifts at the right moment. So it's not like you don't have access to this. It's more, it's inconsistent or the moment needs to be right, would be how I would speak about that.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, that's absolutely been coming into my awareness too. Similar themes of that immediate logical next step. Is like whatever that next step that comes, then you're made aware, you're given what you need to be able to take that next step.
Yeah. Yeah. And how beautiful in what you've been describing with the work that you do with your clients. It feels, I don't know why I'm going on the Wizard of Oz theme, but it feels like potentially part of, how you're supporting people is helping them see their yellow brick road.
I love that. And Wizard of Oz is my favorite movie growing up.
Whoa, right on. Right
Yeah.
on. Well, and the other thing that stands out to me is you're a 2-4. So, in some ways, what I've heard and what you've described in your trajectory is like, I don't know, I'm just doing it. So I like to reference back to Good Will Hunting. And it was like, how did that character know how to do all of that high level math? I don't know, he just did it. So for you, it sounds like there have been these moments of time where you've discovered, oh wow, I'm really epic at this, I'm really epic at that. And almost, one of the characteristics that's described with second line profiles is they don't know that it's an epic talent until they actually like do it. So they're getting that reflected back from the people that are in their life. And I could see potentially that YouTube was that for you, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that I found to be true throughout my life is that whenever something has been in alignment with my path, it's always come very easily. I don't really have to
Mm,
work too hard. But the things that have retrospectively not been the best for, or may not have been too aligned are the things that I was really working hard for
uh-huh.
and making very little progress with.
Yeah.
So that's I've seen consistently too with my clients as well, is that when they get more in alignment, everything tends to just work out. And actually, this is the biggest breakthrough that I've had is this whole idea of success and redefining success, because especially with me in my life of getting the cancer diagnosis and I'm okay and I was able to beat it very quickly, thankfully. But literally having this moment where I was like, I had all the success that the world tells you what success is.
Right.
Really, that is not true success, in my opinion,
Hmm.
because you could have all of that, but not be happy, not have that sense of well-being. So that has shifted me, of course, on this path and in the work that I do, have me realize this profound, to me, is the truth, which is essentially that well-being, that connection, that alignment is, if we define success as alignment, like if this is us and this is our higher being or our higher power, or our true self, or whatever you want to call it. Even if you say human design, you could say this is me and this is my alignment with my design. It's multidimensional, so you could put this in any sort of dimension. But the more aligned you are, if you define success by alignment, your life's going to get easier, your life's going to get
Yeah.
better, your relationships are going to get better, your health is going to improve. And so it really makes everything pretty simple. It's
Yeah.
like, well, just put that alignment first. Sometimes it could be kind of more easily said than done, because you could be asking, well, what is alignment, right? Well, there's certain things that can help you get into alignment. Human design is one of those things. There's other great modalities, breath
Sure.
work. I'm doing the quantum hypnosis. There's um, yoga, meditation,
Hmm.
maybe, there's different things, but the more you do to get in alignment, you're realizing that you're removing those barriers to your well-being. And then when those barriers are removed, I almost look at that. I have a metaphor of this like clogged pipe. It's like all these
Yes.
clogged. which sometimes can be due to traumas or difficult events or repressed emotions and different things like that, that we have to then go and do the work. But once we unclog those and the pipe's moving as it should, it's like then we start getting into rapid alignment and then things start coming to us.
Yep.
And then, yes, you will, especially if that's on your path, which generally speaking, we live in the material world. In my opinion, we're actually here to enjoy the material delights. We're here to taste the sweet nectar of the fruit. We're here to enjoy the sounds, the senses of nature and to have these beautiful connections and everything. But
Yep.
all of that comes together. And if we want to enjoy all the beautiful things that life has to offer with, abundant resources, why not? But that all comes together as a byproduct of alignment. So for me personally, I was in alignment in certain ways because I
Mm,
was on that path of being a creator and putting a message out there. It's just that I wasn't completely in alignment with what that message was,
right.
if that makes
100%. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting as you're speaking, I'm also hearing your gate 58, and that's in Uranus. Um, and that's the joyous. So it's we're here to live a beautiful, epic life in the body. And those are the qualities that I'm hearing you speak to. A little bit of gate 55 as well, which is your north node, which is interesting as well. Yeah.
Interesting. See, I love that you're bringing these up too, because
Oh,
I'm
good.
more familiar with the top. I'm more familiar with the G.
Ah,
I haven't even really looked into those ones at the bottom because I'm like, they're not filled in. I don't, whatever. You know.
well, it's the
So
greatest place of wisdom. Like the fact that you have nothing in hanging or pointing at your ego, like that means that you can like let go of proving yourself. Like that's just there's nothing in that learning journey potentially for you around proving yourself or defining your value. And the wisdom potential, because I talk about open centers as kind of like open windows, like if there's a glass window, you can see that the storm is happening outside, but if it's a screen door open, you can feel that storm. So through all of these open, so your spleen is open as well. And then your undefined, these three here, the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus, when you're around somebody, they might activate your experience of gate 55. But all of that is to say, any place that there's openness, that's the greatest place of wisdom because you're screen dooring other people's activations. So you can
wow,
know who's healthy or not. So people who have open spleens, completely open, can be medical intuitives. And that might be part of what's happening with your hypnosis.
absolutely. It makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. And with the energy is moving through us. So that's interesting too. It's almost like we're a prism, a crystal.
Ah, yeah.
I know that Ra talks a lot of bit about that too, about the consciousness crystals,
Yep.
personality crystals, like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it really does show how I love that, how it's tied into some of the metaphysical ideas,
Yeah.
stream, neutrino stream, energy stream, that we are just prisms for that
Yep.
energy, healing, all these things can move through us.
Yep.
So if there's something maybe that is meant to come through me for someone else to help them with
Hmm.
medical, it can channel through me in whatever way that
Yeah.
is. In this case, it seems like that would be through the intuition.
Yeah. And the other beautiful thing that I like to use when it comes to all of this white or openness is if you think about a reflector, you're basically a reflector in your ego. You're a reflector in your spleen, in your sacral, in your root, and your solar plexus. So, yeah. So I think where we're open is a great journey of exploration. Not everybody jives that way, and I think it's a curious place of a lot of discovery. And I want to bring us back to your Saturn return because the other thing that was interesting about your so you're always going to be, because of in human design, the language of cycles or when you were born, it creates an incarnation cross. So at birth, and for the rest of your life, you're the cross of Sphinx. And so as you were talking, I was hearing a lot of spanking. I was hearing a lot of spanking. That's a new word. I don't know what it means. I don't know how to spell it, but there you are. And then the Saturn return, you were a 6-2. So you became more transpersonal. So sixes and five and fifth, people who have profiles either with the five of the conscious side or a six of the conscious side, they're of service to the world. And so the cross that came online then, that's kind of a part of your arsenal. It doesn't completely go away. It just happens to be strongest a year and a half before the cycle date and a year and a half after the cycle date. And so you have this, almost 3-year span of being in the space of the left angle cross of distraction. More
That's
rabbit
so
holes.
so interesting. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that, but it's really interesting that the distraction comes up. And
Mm,
so that would have been in 2018. So yeah, so around the end of 2018, I that was when Reiki started coming into my life. That was when I could have moved to Austin actually then.
mm,
Uh, but I was still trying to make things work with an ex that really wasn't working out too well. And I had moved to Dallas to get my business going, and that really wasn't working out too well. And so I was being shifted at that time to
right.
move to Austin and start all this now. But 2018, I decided to move back. So I moved, and you mentioned 3 years. So I moved back 18, 19, so it would have been 19, 20, 21 for 3 years. And then in 2021, I moved to Austin. So you could say that for those 3 years, I was distracted.
Hmm.
So that's super interesting because
Yeah.
so now I don't know what that cross of distraction is, but I know I was absolutely distracted, and I could have been on the path then. And everything works out the way it should. So I don't look at anything with regret, but I still look back then and I'm like, yeah, I could have gone on this whole journey then, but I was, it took me, I was, took a detour for a few years.
Well, and if we look at, so it takes, your birth, your OG, your original chart, and then it takes your Saturn return chart and it merges all of that together. So that's what we've got on the screen. And so when I was talking before about the gate of struggle, in that cycle, you had more activation around what do I want to struggle for?
Wow.
Um, yeah, so
Yeah.
that maybe was a time of more ripe awareness around struggle.
Yeah. And see, that's what I love the most about all these systems and human design, especially, is that it just gives you so much more compassion for yourself because
Yes.
there might have been something that I could have looked back, right, and been like, you know what, why did I decide or I did this and blah blah blah. But ultimately it just shows that I was literally still just living my cross. I was living my design. I was living my purpose
Yep.
because I was meant to be struggling around that time. I was meant to be distracted. So it wasn't me. It was this is the way that things were always sort of designed in some ways. And whether it looked like me moving back to LA and then, this job and or whether it would have been something completely different, it would have been all the same.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And specifically gate 28 um is activated in your Saturn return twice, in one in a very prominent place. Um, your design sun. The primary, 70% of our energy is coming through the sun. And in that way, you're activated with gate 60, which is the gate of limitations. And it was activated 3 times. So it was a lot of deep learning around what limitations are here to are of value, and which ones do I want to transmute, because this is all in the individual channel, because you also had 3 at that time too. So yeah,
Wow.
there's a lot to explore when somebody goes into these cycles, eh?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
100. So got that whole system connected too from top to bottom. That's
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're no longer a split definition. And you had potentially more energy, tantric energy, between the sacral and the G center. And then you got the prodigal. So this is kind of that person who's getting everybody's stories, and they're like the recorder of the information. And then they go off and they retreat. They kind of have time to themselves to digest the collective's stories and what's kind of the next place to that might offer direction for others. Yeah, because anytime we're talking G to throat, that's all directions for others in the projector realm. So, yeah,
Wow, that's fascinating.
yeah. Well, I want to make sure we have space for more things. And, if you want to keep going, I just booked us for an hour. So we got 7 minutes. Are we keeping going or do you want to, what's happening for you?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm anything that you want to talk about. Was there
Okay.
anything else that you want? Yeah, yeah, I'm good for yeah, any other questions or yeah, I've got time, so I'm happy
Okay.
to.
Yeah. Let's see, share. I was okay. So I'm curious to hear because I'm hearing it when you speak, but I'm curious how you notice your 8-1.
Is, but for me, because I haven't really, really dived into all of it, what I look at it is just like what is the connection between my G center and my throat? And so it's interesting because what I've noticed with that, especially when it comes to the split definition of the 61 to the 24, is, and this is something that's just a part of my life, just really pronounced, is that so whenever I'm speaking on something, I'm always speaking from a sense of knowing. I'm speaking from that
Mhm.
sense of, you could say it's the heart, but it's something deeper, which we could say it's the monopole. We could say it's that G center. So as I'm speaking from a place of knowing, when I'm speaking, I'm not even thinking. It's just coming out as like spontaneously out of a
Right.
knowing. It's no thought process behind it. But whenever I'm thinking about things, especially if I'm getting these downloads or I'm getting these inspiration, and I don't really like, I'm processing it. It's interesting because I can understand things like mentally, I can grasp concepts if new things are coming to me. But if I'm trying to speak to someone about something that I'm just understanding or just putting together, it just comes out as gibberish because
Yep.
it's, even though I can understand it, I can see everything. It's like I'm seeing the
Yep.
stars, relation, how they all connect, and I get it. But when I'm trying to talk about it, it's like it would, to anyone that was listening, it would be like this person doesn't really know what they're talking about. And in some ways, that's true. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I understand it. I intellectualize it. It needs to be a knowing before I can speak on it. So that's how I experience
Perfect.
that when I'm speaking on it. It's, I can really only speak with authority on things that I really know about. And I feel comfortable with that too, because now I'm self-aware, especially thanks to human design, enough to be like, if I'm, if I realize that I'm starting to speak on something I don't know about, I kind of just stop myself and I either caveat it by saying, I don't really know, that I'll just speak on kind of my ideas of things, or I'll just stop
Mhm.
myself and be like, yeah, that's kind of, that's about as far as I go. And I just won't even go further because I just know it's going to start coming out choppy and different things like that. So it's interesting. Yeah, that's been one of the biggest things that but I'm also not sure if maybe it's also related to the 10 to the 22.
I
Could be,
know. Yeah.
but yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm getting a lot of pings. Like, first of all, how you are articulating your knowing versus not knowing, like that's textbook individual circuitry, which is gate 8 to 1. However, I'm hearing more so 6124. So anything that's in the individual circuitry is going to be, it's almost like a light switch. Is the light switch on and the knowing is flowing? Or is the light switch off? And what I really love to encourage clients about when the light switch is off is that's potentially the caterpillar in the pupa stage that's not ready at the butterfly stage. And so I was tracking as you were talking that you recognize, oh, this is still pupa. Oh, this is still, I'm not, I don't have it fully sussed out yet. Rather, when you're in those moments and potentially you're in spaces with somebody who gives you access to 43, either because they have it or because they have the 1722 or they have the 1156. But you might be kind of borrowing their life force activation. And then it's like, whoa, look at this information come out. So this, I say magical just in hearing what you're connecting to. It's like this magical a dreamscape or like I don't know. I'm getting images of like a quantum puzzle, that's happening up in the sky. And you're seeing it, you're understanding it, but ask you to articulate it before it's time. It's kind of like the bun's still in the oven. Like the pie hasn't, the crust isn't ready yet to take out of the oven. And so the other place that is consistent or is talked about within human design about individual circuitry is when that light switch is in the off position and it's more the pupa, it's more the inward space. And that's when melancholy can arrive. And melancholy can be that, you're not a defined solar plexus. So you're not necessarily going to have those ups and down emotional waves like a defined solar plexus might. Yet, because of this individual circuitry, that melancholy, when that knowing download switch is in the off position, it's in the cooking phase. It's that seed that's under the soil. And so much is happening underneath the soil. Like there's, mutation, like in a caterpillar, right? It's eating itself so that it can transform something. Because anybody with individual circuitry, they're mutating themselves. And the people that are in auric space or in connection space with them kind of get a little bit of off gassing of that mutation. So they can be like, I'm just hanging around Alex and I see life differently now. What happened? So it's almost again back to the being thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And what's super interesting too, while you were mentioning that as well, and just kind of this, speaking from that place of knowing, it's interesting because I've also noticed that these centers, especially when it comes to the split definition, is there's parts of our consciousness in each of them. And when I'm speaking, because again, I'm speaking from that place of knowing, it's really interesting because again, I'm not thinking about what I'm speaking about. So I'm just speaking from this place. But it's interesting because there's still part of my consciousness up here that's listening to what I'm
yep.
saying. So while I'm speaking, because I'm not thinking, the thinking part's actually receiving what I'm saying. And I don't know, maybe that's where the self-projected comes into some degree, but
Mm,
ultimately that's what gets interesting because as I'm speaking on something and I know it, then it's like one part of me, this part is speaking from a place of knowing. This part of me is being like, yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah. And so it's one part of me is actually understanding while I'm speaking. But if I'm speaking on something I don't know, and then the part of me is like, wait, that doesn't make any sense, then I instantly have that thing of like, I'm going to shut up now because I don't even understand what I'm saying, you know?
right.
But it's interesting too because yeah, it's almost like I can sense how other people are maybe interpreting it or taking things in because I'm also listening and
Mhm.
observing. And it was interesting too because in around that same time, that I moved to Austin, so that would have been 2021. Um, I went through this period, especially because I had just, broken up. So, got back together with my ex, and then we had broken up again. And I was being shifted on a soul level, on a spiritual level. I was being shifted into this new spiritual practitioner, but I was clinging
Mm,
to fear. A part of me was clinging to fear of what that would mean going into that. How was I going to make money? How was I going to,
mhm.
you know, all of this. And I started to get these anxiety attacks and panic attacks out of nowhere. And so it was funny because my job at the time, I was actually running social media for Dr. Phil, which is he's going off the
Oh, I
air
know
pretty
who it
soon,
is. Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
you know, but it's a big, talk
Big
show.
energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I used to do these presentations where I was, giving presentations on our social media progress and different things like that. And this is when I had my first anxiety attack is when I was
Mm,
given a presentation and I just froze. And it was because it was a part of me then that was being shifted. And this is where it's all connected to the G center too, right? That speaking, because at a certain point in my old, in LA in that scenario, I was that maybe was connected more to my purpose at that time. But when I shifted and I was now moving in that spiritual direction, hadn't fully caught up to it. And I was speaking on something that I just didn't really care about and
mm.
didn't really care to even know any more about. And it was interesting because like I was trying to speak on it, and then it was almost like my G center shut down and no
Ah,
words could come out. And then my split up top, the head was started freaking out, and it's like, what's going on? And then I just went through a period where I was literally
right.
working, panic attacks for a few months of just this would come up, another few times. And ultimately I had to, thankfully I did have a knowing deep down that it was about this shift, but it was interesting just to see those dynamics at play of kind of speaking from this and knowing, but
Yeah.
but when you're speaking from your G center and the G center is so pronounced in your chart, if that goes offline, well, a lot of other things are going to go offline too. So that was
Yeah.
interesting when it
Well,
came up.
and what I've kind of holding as a hypothesis myself is, anxiety. I think anxiety can kind of maybe have an origin space in many places in the body. And how you were speaking to it or how I was hearing you speak to it, it's almost like I was sensing the brain being like, dude, I got you, and you're not listening to me. Like, what's going on? We had an agreement, kind of like the severing of that following the mind, because that's the other trajectory, or that can be a component of what human design is offering, is saying, well, what does the body know? What's the inner wisdom that's available? And as you were speaking earlier, I was curious to offer for you the difference between, because both 20 and 10 and 8 and 1 are both in individual circuitry, but 2010 is the more like survival-y version. It's like it's part of the centerings. Well, the 10 is part of the centering circuit, and then the 20 is part of the integration circuit. But there's this old-timey song that I love to refer to from Stephen Lawrence, and it's I gotta be me, I gotta be me. And it's basically, if I'm not me, then just kill me. So it's this really grip of self-identified. I have to love myself. I have to be fully myself, or let's just die.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's so interesting. Yeah, especially again, it just makes you wonder sometimes why we have the designs that we have because
Mm,
we're here to learn, in a sense, maybe for me, I'm so used to expressing myself in the sense of a collective that an
mm.
individual experience could be very important. Or, it's interesting too, because I've also run my chart for my most previous past life. And
Ah,
that gives a whole nother perspective, right? To see what your chart was in your past life and then see what your chart is in this life. And there's actually a lot of
wild.
similarities between my chart in my most recent past life and my chart now. But now I'm a projector, whereas before I was a generator. And
Interesting.
yeah, but other than that, there were a lot of similarities, like a lot of the same gates, a lot of the same centers were activated. And so
Wow.
yeah, it's really interesting, because again, it's for me what, especially with my modality and how it fits into human design, it's interesting to tell the whole story. Where does
Mm,
the story fit into the whole story?
yeah.
And and really having this experience, but realizing that if your entire soul is a book, then
Mm,
you're one chapter in that. So the more we know about the book, the more we know about our chapter, and we can kind of puts us more at ease as well, because there's a sense of learning your design and being in the flow and at ease with your design, but then on a soul level, learning what that whole story is, learning what that whole book is, and then feeling even more at ease knowing that, okay, I'm not only comfortable in my own body, but I'm comfortable in my own
mhm.
scenario.
Yeah, so something that's coming to mind that I want to ask is, the work of Dr. Michael Newton. I think I'm getting his name correct, where like his book Life Between Lives, that kind of, I think it's hypnosis, where it's taking a person who's struggling in life, which it sounded like you were speaking to, and then going to, what's the origin of that? And then it ends up that they get that like macrocosm, a view of their life. But then also the parts that I've been listening to that I get really juiced about is, oh, I get to remember who's my soul family, kind of that experience. I'm curious, is that something that's in the space that you're working with?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I call these three the big three. So there's Brian Weiss, there's Michael Newton, and there's Dolores Cannon. So Brian
Okay.
Weiss, the buttoned up psychiatrist, was the head of, I forget where it was, but it was a big school or a hospital. And he, had it stumbled on a client that went into a past life, and now he's, the biggest name in past life regression. Michael Newton is kind of the life between lives He's the, so everything Life Between Lives, he really paved that way, was that pioneer. And Dolores Cannon, she was more, and two of them are passed away. So Michael Newton, Dolores Cannon passed away. Brian Weiss is the only one that's still alive. But Dolores Cannon, she was more about the ETs, more about the um, angels or ascended masters, different things like that. And so when you take all these three together, you have a very interesting body of work. All that to say that, yes, so what I have done is I've adapted these three techniques and more into one single sort of modality or method that goes wherever it needs to. So that will go to past lives, it will go to interplanetary, it will go to the angelic realm, it will go to the life between lives, the spiritual space. So absolutely, there was a client that I had just the other day that she had this beautiful experience where she was going back to her soul group and she was
Right.
going back life review, and and that's a fascinating book. If anyone's really interested in the life between lives, I would highly recommend Michael Newton's book, The Journey of Souls. If you're looking for a recommendation for past life regression, Many Lives, Many Masters, that's like the quintessential book there. For Dolores Cannon's work, I would say if you feel called to the idea of of being a star seed, then Three Waves of Volunteers is that one. Otherwise, I would say for hers, where would you start? Her work is so deep. I would say if you really want to like bend your mind, she calls it like bend your mind like a pretzel. Read the Convoluted Universe, but any one of her books is really pretty interesting. But anyway, so yeah, absolutely. So this method can go anywhere, and whenever people have those experiences, they're so profound. There's so much of an emotional release and just
Mm.
connecting with those loved ones on the other side. And oftentimes it is you notice and you see that the same people that you love in this life that you've been with and that you're actually here on a journey, and they cast in different roles. See, not everyone, sometimes the people that we really want to be with that maybe we're not meant to be with in this life, we were already with and we were in, different lives, but this might not have been the life to actually end up with them.
Yeah.
So that can be difficult when it comes up. And it's not uncommon actually that, you won't that there'll be someone that feels like a soulmate or someone that we love that we didn't end up with, but that doesn't mean that they're not a soulmate. It doesn't mean that they're not somebody that we do love and that we have been with many times before, but maybe just this life wasn't the one that was supposed to be it for this.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I know that personally. So I wasn't born with the name Name. It came in a song and I was ready to live more for my spiritual self. And um, life trajectory, a lot of abandonment themes. And I was in like clinical therapist, like psychiatry kind of therapy session. And the therapist was speaking with me and said, I don't know if this is true, and this happens a lot, and people don't always understand or recognize this, but is it possible that you are one of a twin? And my whole body turned into a puddle in the sense of I just broke into tears and was like, somebody finally put words to why it was that I felt like my other half was missing. And it's interesting if you take Name and you turn it and spell it backwards, it spells He-Man, Master of the Universe. And so I've done work with people who can see what I'm not able to fully see, where I've talked with He-Man. And because he was in utero, he didn't exit the body. My parents didn't fully know yet. When my mom was pregnant, the doctor said, "Are you sure you're not having twins?" Like they went down this pathway of twin because of how her body was shifting and changing. Anyway, I've done a lot of work with my twin and that he, wasn't his trajectory wasn't to stay in the body, but to what you're speaking to, um, in that session with the seer who could give me access to more information, what she channeled for me to hear was that it wasn't his life, this life, it was mine. And so his gift to me, or what he wanted me to know, is like everything that would have been me, I gave you. So now you can have a fuller, more powerful, et cetera, experience. Um, and I'm up here, master of the universe, like I'm cheering you on. I've got you up there. You're doing the down here version. So I resonate. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that too. That's so beautiful. And that is, I would say, some of the most rewarding things about this work is when someone can, because again, in this, you're actually going and connecting with them yourself. And in many cases, you could see them and it could
Mm,
be HD, feel like you're there. And for people to have that when they can connect with their, because this, I mean, and I don't usually, now we're talking about it. I like to talk about, I don't usually talk about this right away because it challenges some belief systems. But in these sessions, you can get to the point where you're connecting with deceased loved ones and then you're seeing them. And when that happens, and again, yeah, it's so powerful because just gives you that peace that life goes on and
hmm
that they'll connect and there's things that they'll tell you and different things that you wouldn't just be able to make up. It's like, and
Yeah.
so yeah, that's some of the most profound when it gets to the point where it's literally you can connect with your guides, you can connect with, and yeah, it's truly amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm thrilled to know that this is among the basket or among the skills and places that people who choose to work with you can explore. What a gift.
Yeah, and even getting the answers because right, if you grew up in a difficult situation where you're feeling abandoned, or let's say you were adopted, or
Mm,
things like that, it can be very, you can have a lot of questions around that sense of identity, or why did this happen? Why would I have chosen these parents? Or what, because it would be hard to fathom that you would actually choose your parents,
yeah.
right? That's that it's again, it challenges a lot of belief systems because people will be like, no, I would never choose but it's like,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah.
So if that's something that you can accept, or you get to the point,
Yeah.
one day where you may keep an open mind to being able to accept that, then you can actually go explore and you can find out the reason why. And once you get the reason why and you start to know all that, it just has so much more peace because then you're not only accepting the circumstances, you're accepting yourself.
Yeah.
And so it just brings so much peace to be like, okay. And that's where it gets to understanding how our life, this chapter works in our book.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh,
Mm,
so I chose this because this is what happened in the last one because I wanted to explore this. I wanted to learn this.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. It's almost like we turn the holograph and we, can see it from another perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brandy, sorry.
I was going to say, have you read the book, The Journey of Souls? Did you end up reading that?
I think so. I was trying not to have it be obvious, but I was scrolling through my Audible just to try and get what the title was because I couldn't remember Michael Newton's name. Yeah, but I there was a time where it was actually after went to Claire Vision and did that experience of the IST, the internal or the inner I've lost the name. But yeah, I was on a long drive and I was like, we got to do this. So yeah, I've gone through a lot of those books and gone back, because there's so many layers to what the discoveries are for the people who go into these spaces. Yeah. Kind of like how
Exactly.
you were speaking to it's recorded and years later you're listening to it again or weeks later, there's more that the system can digest and take in the second or the fifth or the 10th time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just find it so fascinating, the ideas of, reviewing your life, choosing your next life and
Yep.
all. It just kind of, yeah, really kind of puts you in a space of thinking, about, okay, well, if that's true, then that really changes a
Yeah.
lot of things. Yeah.
Well, back to one of the themes we've been talking about is, what potentially the birth chart, in human design is offering. One of the workshops that Brandy Jordan did last year, and she'll be here again this year doing the keynote among other things. But the container that she guided the group of us through was basically looking at ourselves and then whomever we want to look at, where maybe we've got that like tension or struggle, and to look at their chart in comparison to our chart and see what the gift is of maybe the ick that we're struggling with. So like as I'm hearing you talk about your work, it's well, from a soul level, how can we see this? And what she was saying, or what she was supporting the group to explore, and I think she does this with clients individually, is okay, well, this person was hard for me, perceivably. And then to your point about we choose who are our parents. We choose who, we're in connection with on that soul contract, before we come into the body experience. And now it's looking at the charts and seeing, oh, this tension was actually one of my biggest journeys of learning.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why I always say if it's something that you hate, it's something that your soul loves, because it's like we were like, oh, why would I choose? I would never. It's like, but that's actually where you're learning the most. So, your soul's
Yeah.
like, look, stop stacking all these like difficult situations. It's like, we're gonna get through a lot of stuff. We're gonna learn a lot. And then
Yeah.
you're here. What did I sign up for? You know?
Right. 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 Yeah. Well, that feels like a beautiful segue for what you're offering at the conference. I mean, I didn't even think about pulling the chart of my past life. That's
Exactly.
epic.
Yeah, I mean, I was happy that I was able to figure out the
Mm,
birthday and the time, and it's not, I don't know the exact time, but people in that region and that part of the world were generally getting born at relatively the same times around noon and things like that. So, and it also looking at the life seems very accurate. But yeah, that's kind of one of the things that I kind of want to in the conference bring up because I feel like it takes you out of what we're normally used to thinking. We're used to thinking our own chart, but then when you
mm,
think, oh, if you can accept the idea that you may have had past lives or that you may have had other experiences, other lifetimes, whatever that may look like, then
mm.
you've also had another chart. And how does this chart play into that?
Yeah.
So then it just kind of gets you out of thinking, oh, okay, maybe I didn't think too much about that before.
Mm,
And ultimately, that's kind of, yeah, that's really the path that I'm pursuing is being able to help someone understand their greater sense of identity beyond just this particular incarnation, their entire soul,
mm.
um, yeah, identity. And this is where it gets more into maybe some sort of out there topics in certain ways, but
Bring it.
yeah, just
I'm here for
yeah.
it. Yeah.
But yeah, just this idea that there's different star systems, this
Mm,
idea that we may come from different places in the stars, and Earth is sort of this giant play where we're all playing these
yeah.
different characters. But when you look at it, there's so many different people in the world, and a lot of the people that may even be watching this from different countries. And think about how different we all are from different cultures, different backgrounds, different societies and how we're all almost foreign to one another. I mean, literally people in different countries, right? We're all speaking foreign languages. We have different things, and it's not too different than what it probably is like
Yeah.
there out in the cosmos. And not only that, but think about whales, think about dolphins, think about all these other beings that are here that are having experiences. And
Mhm.
technically, in a human design perspective, they've all got charts too, right? Plants have charts, animals have charts. But so it makes you think about us more as a collective rather than just this
Mm,
ourselves and how we're all part of a greater system,
mhm.
right? Does the earth have a chart? Does our solar system have a chart? Probably, right? On some level there's probably a chart for that too. What we are to human design, there's probably on the higher galactic planes is a chart for this solar system and where it's running its course, right? And so then you just start to think about how we're all connected and different things like that. And yeah, so that just kind of
Mhm.
that's a lot of what is my sort of guiding force, I would say, these days is just kind of having that better sense of understanding of who we are as a soul and what our place is. And that's what I really believe to be something that I enjoy bringing to the human design community
Mm,
because it kind of helps us also realize that it's two sides of the same coin.
mhm.
If you only have the human component, but you don't have the soul,
Totally.
you're missing a piece. But if you
Yep.
only have the soul, you don't have the human, well, then you're missing a piece too.
Yep.
So when you get both of those, when you realize that you're a soul with a body, you're a greater being and you have a body, and the body is the car. It's like you got the Toyota Corolla, the 99, right? But if you want to soup that up, what do? Well, you could do some ayahuasca, you could do some breath work, you could do some meditation, you could do so it's kind of a way to sort of like upgrade the driver, so to speak. You maybe
Mm,
in that sense you can't change your car. This is funny too because there is all these mutations, right? So this is funny when it comes to human design. Is I feel like with like my perception of different diseases and
Mm.
sickness, all these different things are we kind of get these upgrades. So it's almost like the vehicle is constantly getting an upgrade, right? You got a Toyota Corolla
Yep.
and, but now you're getting that, you know, you're getting the 2024 upgrade of it. So
Yep.
in 2024, what you get COVID, you get sick, all this type of stuff, but that's literally on an energetic level, you're getting the upgrade. But so your car is getting an upgrade automatically, but you as the driver, are you upgrading yourself?
Yes.
So it's nice that the universe is always kind of upgrading our vehicle, but are we taking care of the vehicle? Are we putting the right fuel in the vehicle? Right? Are
Yeah.
we exercising or going for walks or treating ourselves with love? It's like, are we giving good energy to our vehicle? Right.
Yep.
And that's if we start to suffer as a being, as a soul, then
Hmm.
our vehicle is going to suffer too.
Yep.
That's where I really love, again, that's what I'm really excited about for, the talk that I'm going to do, or I guess it's going to be more of a guided meditation and just kind of help to connect people with that part of themselves so that they can be the best driver that they can be and they can take care
Mm.
of their best as they can.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And a tidbit of maybe you've considered this, but on that theme of, animals, whales, all there's so many ways that we can look at things or a thing. I don't like that I said thing, but we can look at an entity's chart is as somebody on Instagram was looking at when Facebook started. So they did a chart for Facebook. They did a chart for Instagram. So there could be a chart on YouTube. Like that's depending upon how somebody orients, you know, is there a soul within Facebook? Is there a soul within Instagram, etc.? It's kind of like endless curiosities where those things could go. Like in business, what's the origin timeline of the business? Dr. Phil, his on TV show, like whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it just shows how there's all it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what's interesting too, is just the idea of this, a higher power or something like
Mm,
that. Are we part of a greater system,
mm,
or is it all just chaos? And what I love about human design is that it forces you to think. And I don't want to project my own beliefs, but it forces you to think about, okay, if there is a system in place, I mean, that's a pretty perfect system.
mm,
So,
mm,
and then you look at the Fibonacci, you look at different things like that are very perfect.
mm.
And why do we always strive for perfection in a lot of ways, right? A
Uh-huh.
lot of us tend to be, especially in this space, tend to be perfectionists, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're always trying to be perfect. We can be hard on ourselves and things like that. But it really just shows how, yeah, if we're striving to be perfect, but then we look at nature and we look at
Mm,
this human design system that, in many ways, I mean, it's perfect in the sense that I mean, it's not like one person's chart doesn't make any sense. It's not like, oh, you got a good chart and your chart is right for you, but this chart doesn't work for you.
mm, mm,
Like it works across the board. It's a perfect system.
mm-hmm.
So it just goes to show that, well, maybe it makes you think that there might be some creator out there,
Mm. Yeah.
and ultimately, you know, bringing it all full circle in certain ways. So I did ayahuasca this year. And yeah, one of the biggest breakthroughs that I had on it, then there was a lot of them, but was this sense that towards the end of the experience, it was a kind of a retreat, and at the end of the experience, there was just this moment where it took me almost through the death experience,
Mm.
which in a sense was very scary at first. I mean, it made
Sure.
me really feel like I was dying, which was a huge fear of mine, and and I literally felt like I was going to die. And so I started to freak out, but then it was just like, you're okay. But then ultimately, I kind of transcended that and almost sort of had this experience that it wasn't super visual, but it was more just like an experience of transcending death and realizing that it's all okay. I'm still alive. I'm still fine. And that feeling that there's order to everything, that
Mm.
everything is okay, that all is well still. I could have the biggest fear in the world of that I'm going to die or that it's all going to be over and that I'm actually okay. I'm still alive. like I just felt so at peace and so safe. And I can't even describe that in words. I wish I could bottle that feeling up and give
Mhm.
it to every single person because that would heal the world instantly. Not that it's, anyone really needs to be healed. We're all on a perfect path, but it was just that feeling of just imagine feeling so safe that you just knew in all of the cells of your body that all is well.
Right.
And you're just safe. And it was like that was the what really kind of it was probably the most profound experience of my life so far of just
Beautiful.
really knowing that I'm safe and that
Mm.
everything is okay and that couldn't do it wrong even if you tried. And human
Mm.
design also reflects that, right?
Mm.
Reflects that. Nature reflects that. Is there a leaf that grows wrong
Mm.
when the Fibonacci is in that? Is there a person that's born wrong when they've got a chart?
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, congratulations on connecting to that feeling and being able to kind of bring that with you in your trajectory of where life takes you next. Yeah, feels
Yeah,
like a
absolutely.
beautiful
Yeah,
thing.
super interesting too. Yeah, because after the ayahuasca experience, it was like my sessions got so much better as
Mm.
well. And
Mm.
so yeah, I love things like that. It just, human design, plant medicines, eh,
Hmm.
anything that's out there that really helps you connect with
Yeah.
that part of yourself. It's powerful.
Well, I'm curious. I feel like you've spoken to it kind of like s- a little bit. I don't know, this is like seeds. I'm curious if you would speak to how, like what a session with you looks like or how you facilitate time with clients. Because it feels like there's potentially a number of ways that um, comes forward. I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. So yeah, so this has kind of been being adapted with time, but right now, usually it's so the first session is 4 hours. So these are
Mhm.
longer sessions, 4 hours, and then every subsequent session is around 3 hours. And yeah, the way that looks is in the beginning. So for the first session, it's an extra hour because we spend some time talking. So it's not like we're just jumping right into hypnosis or anything like that. We're kind of talking about the person's life and some of these themes that have come up, what they're working on, what their intentions are, and kind of getting into some stuff there. But ultimately, then when the session actually starts, it's more like a guided meditation initially than anything else. So I have a um, sort of a meditation that I do, and that helps to put the person in a helps them relax and there's two components. So there's relaxing is important, and then the next component is visualizing. So that we're in the relaxing, we're activating the heart, and visualizing, we're activating the brain. And by both of those coming into this place
Mm.
of coherence, creates this altered state. And the altered state is where you actually tap into your higher self, you tap into guides, you tap into the cosmos. And so essentially, the more you relax and the more you visualize, that's going to create this theta state. So that's wavelengths, brain waves. We're usually hovering between alpha, which is the light trance state, and theta, which is the deep trance state. The goal is to get as deep theta as we can because that's where all the true magic happens. And all hypnosis is self hypnosis. So the person does go there on their own. It's not like I'm just snapping my fingers, dropping them in.
Mm.
They're kind of guiding themselves with my guidance. They're guiding themselves. So yeah, essentially, for the next couple hours, 2.5 hours, it's us going in that space through the meditation. The meditation kind of drops them in, and they're letting me know kind of what they're getting. Maybe they go to past lives. Maybe they go to, you could call it their ancestors' lives, or they go to memories. So the way I've adapted this technique is it could go anywhere. It totally just embraces the higher self, that the higher self's going to take them wherever they need for whatever their issue is, whatever they're coming in for. So it's not going to take them to a past life if they don't want to. Unless somebody comes in and they say, I want to go see my past lives because I'm curious, then I'm like, okay, we could do that. But 99.9% of people aren't doing that. 99.9% of people are coming in saying, I need help with this. I've got anxiety. I've got this phobia, or this
Mm.
has been coming in my life. I've got depression, and things like that. So the beautiful thing is that I don't really need to know where or why or what or the how or anything. I just run them through my method and it helps to take them exactly where they need to go. And then if that's memories, if that's needing to see things a certain way, it basically just says, hey, I don't know where to need to take them. Like higher self, you take them there, you know? So it's
Yeah,
like I got you. So they take them to where they need to go. And yeah, and then essentially, and sometimes that can be really fun. And I mean, what's always actually fun and interesting, but sometimes that can be, maybe more exciting than maybe what we think where it might be, like going through revisiting traumas and different things like that. And it's never anything that's truly scary or that's truly too difficult. The most it ever gets, as far as it ever being difficult, is just showing somebody something from a different angle or helping them process something that maybe they didn't process before. Because, especially when it comes to childhood, and when you think about it, how impactful was our childhood to who we are today, right? And that's just this life, right? But think
right.
about your as a soul, your childhood was your past lives,
Hmm.
So if we can accept that we have had past lives or past experiences, then those past lives are probably pretty important to make you who you are today.
Yeah.
So by revisiting some of the things that you might not have faced in those lives, that you might have suppressed those down. How many emotions and different things, difficult things that we face just in this life alone that we've suppressed down, that we
Yep.
haven't even, and now we're talking about other situations, right? So there's stuff there for sure. And so whenever we go there, we're able to kind of reintegrate, we're able to see it from a different perspective. And it's this beautiful sort of essence of reclaiming that power, reclaiming that back. I left it back in the 1800s. I left this piece of me back in the 1600s. I left this piece of me back in, you know, 2000 BC. I left this piece of me back in ancient Egypt, and we go through all that and we get to see these different things. And that's where it's this beautiful self-knowing and self-discovery too, because you're like, oh, I didn't realize that back in ancient Egypt, I was, I had this type of role and I was this type of person and I'm still kind of like that and I'm still this. And it's like, oh, so that's not just me, that's a soul quality.
Yeah.
You get so much of a more of a sense of ownership over that domain and you claim that because you're like, yeah, that is me. And that adds a dimension of self-knowing, and that's ultimately contributes to a lot of confidence, because once you actually start knowing more about who you are on a
Mm.
soul level, that's when your confidence comes in. The anxiety comes in a lot when there's doubt and uncertainty. So, as we're able to kind of rebuild that and be like, oh, you're actually this and you've always been this and this and that, and then you actually create this. I almost say it's almost like if we just look at it from this life and different things like that and the things that we work on, it's like we have a foundation to build, a house. But whenever we go back and we start to go to the root, we're able to actually create the foundation to build a skyscraper. And then we
Nice.
can build more because we're going back and we're actually, building a much sturdier foundation that allows us to actually build true confidence, not just a hollow confidence that I'm this, but do you really have all that to look back on to really say? Because we can only go back to birth, but when you go back before birth, right, you're
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay, right,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm right there with you. It's almost like we're doing this in this life, and through these sessions, it's like, whoa, look at more that's here. Look at more that's available to remember and feel and resonate with. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So yeah, and so that's basically it. And then the last 30 minutes, we're just kind of talking, integrating, absorbing, and then, in between sessions, there's some absorbing and integrating and journaling that can happen. And then we keep going. And it's really cool because when you do multiple sessions, a package, a program, then it goes deeper every time. It goes further every time. You get more of the story. It's almost like every series of sessions is its own little book. And maybe the first one is chapter
Right.
one, then chapter three. And by the end, you're like, okay, I'm going to sit on this for a while, you know?
Well, I'm curious, like, is there a system that you have for capturing the information that comes forward? Because I would imagine in the theta state, or I don't know if I'm naming the state correctly, but like that logical like inventory brain is not present. So like I'd want to know all those juicy details. So is that a component that you offer that's included?
Yeah, so essentially I'm recording the sessions. So
Mm,
their sessions, and then I give a
great.
transcript, I give a summary, I give a recording. So they're
Great.
getting everyone gets everything. So you can go and revisit it. You can, and it breaks it down, those action items and different things like that. So it's pretty cool. So I mean, the sessions that I've done too, I mean, I'll still go and revisit those and I'll still have those coming
Yeah.
to mind Especially the first one I've done was very profound. I mean, they've all been profound, but the first one it really gave me a sense of what my greater sense of purpose was really just more about balance. And so it keeps me in check that when I'm,
Mm,
going too far in one direction, if I'm focusing too much on work and not about relationships or too much and, it keeps me centered of, okay, I'm really actually here to balance. It's actually not about achievement at all. It's actually about just, can I balance it all this time? Because I
hmm.
failed at that in my last one. So, or maybe, I mean, did I really fail? But I didn't maybe execute as much as I would have
Yeah,
wanted to.
yeah.
More in this one is I want to do it right. I'd like to do it better this time, but yeah.
It's almost like this is um I don't mean this insensitively, but I'm getting this image of like a video game. Like each of our soul is the character that's in the video game, and like each life is, do you get what I'm saying? Like, the
Yeah,
character dies and it's like, whoop, I get to do it again. And then look, I might be in a
yeah,
different part of the video game.
that's a great way to put at it. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So it's like, let's say you're on level,
Right,
you know, 60, and if you mess at level 60, you might have to like you could do it again or whatever, but
right.
you're always on to the next one. So it's
Yeah,
like, oh, you beat this one, now there's a new one, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah,
It's funny how there is these microcosms and macrocosms, and when you look at different things, it's like you can see that these systems, if it's the system that's here and now, it's probably connected to
yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I've done quite a bit of past life journeying myself, and um, I think the places that I've gone back to the most are when I was in a death experience that was like, and to your point of like something gets frozen, something gets cemented, and like as the soul is leaving the body, there might be some imprinting of like, well, if I wouldn't have shit the bed, I wouldn't have died, or something like that. And it's like, okay, we're gonna come back and look at this and have more of a perspective or bring more compassion or span out the view and see. Like I had a past life where I was a mother with an infant when Pompeii was happening. And so I have that experience of, sensing, whatever it was materially that was coming in and killing, and just being so in love with this new being, and yet knowing that the death is coming. And so there's something in my soul side that anchored with that life, and then, made stories and made connections that by revisiting it, it helped me to kind of span out or love on myself a little bit differently.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I love how that connects to this idea of, human design in 2027 and
Mm,
things, because it's almost like if your soul is here to help with some impending type of thing, what better than to have a life in Pompeii where something's going to come, but you have this other being that you're loving and that you're protecting and,
yeah,
to give you practice for so it's so interesting how all these things can right? Because ultimately
yeah,
it all really comes down to love,
mm,
connection and compassion and
yeah,
unity and all these things. So that's beautiful.
completely. Well, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to meet you in person and to experience what your meditation evokes in me and for those who are present. It sounds really juicy. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because with the group program, this is only going to be the second time that I've done one in a group. I usually only work one to one.
sure.
But I'm going to start doing more groups. And the only time that I've done it before was at a birthday party actually, and which is
That's a
funny.
unique birthday party.
It truly was, yeah. Because they were doing like it was like an open kind of an open mic where people were reading poetry and they were like, Alex, go read a poem. And I'm like, I haven't written any poems. And they're like, well, why don't you, do one of your, could you do a
Mm,
path like regression? I'm like, I guess I could try. I mean, I know people have done it in groups. And so I just,
interesting.
it's like, yeah, so they put me on the spot, but I went and did it and people had experiences there, there's handful of people there that were crying and people just had these very profound experiences. And so,
Yeah.
you know what? This worked. So this gives me another opportunity to give another shot. So I'm hoping that it'll be impactful for people. And I'm working on a kind of meditation, but it's definitely a different style than the one-to-one. It's a different art form
Hmm.
because the one, I mean, you're right in there with the person, right? Like if you
Right.
and I are, I'm right in there with you and I'm, helping, I'm just focused on you. But in a group, everyone's having their own experiences. They're not talking to me. So I'm just having to kind of go with my
Mm,
own guidance on like where to move it forward, what to have them and kind of imagining, what the entire group might be experiencing so that I can help. So it's a
hmm.
whole different thing. So, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for it too, and excited that you're going to be there and hopefully
Yeah.
anyone else watching. And yeah, I'd love to have it be streamed as well because there's no reason it couldn't be
Oh,
done.
great.
I'll talk to Jonah about that and see if we can stream it for everyone because I don't
Cool.
see why we shouldn't be able to do that if we can.
Yeah, lovely. And have you come to Santa Fe? Is this your first time? Are you a big fan?
Yeah, this will be my second time. So yeah, so the
Okay.
last time I was there, yeah, I stayed at the center, which was a really
Oh,
nice.
nice.
Yeah, yeah. So big shout out to Jonah for kind of introducing me to some of the Santa Fe community and everything. So I got to meet some people there, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. We went out and got to check out the city and the more of the downtown area, which was really nice. And
Neat.
but I wasn't there for the conference last year. That was I was just going through to Sedona and stayed over. But yeah, I'm excited for it. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I just love this community, and the community just inspired me so much. And I really just resonate with everyone, and I feel like we're all on a very similar journey. So it's just everyone that you meet in this community is just so fascinating and so I just can't wait. I'm excited to meet you and I'm excited to meet everyone.
Same, same, same. Well, awesome. I can't wait to experience it, meet you, and see all that arrives. Yeah, we'll see you super soon.
Awesome. That sounds great. Looking forward
And
to it.
and thanks so much for spending the time together in this space so people can get a sense of you and hear so much about your journey. That felt like a real big gift. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just so everyone knows as well, this can be done online as well. And there is
Oh,
pros
good.
and yeah, absolutely. So if anyone's wondering about working with me or anyone else, and I recommend there's different pros and cons. I'll say this before I go. There's different pros and cons of doing it in person versus online. It can be done online. It works just as well online. In some cases, it works better online because you're in your own environment, you're
Yep.
safe, you're feeling comfortable, you're in your bed. The only thing to look out for is distraction. So if you do have any distractions around, like let's say you have roommates or you have pets that would be, anything or you just want the in-person experience, then absolutely have it in person. But yeah, just because that's the question I get a lot is can this be done online? Is it safe? It's perfectly safe? It can be done online.
And I'll say, like, you and I haven't worked together, and I've done a lot online, and I've had really profound experiences of one, myself being able to access places and sense the other person who's on the other side, of the phone or the computer, and have felt them like with me. And it's different. And I'll say there's a lot there. So I agree. I agree.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, see
Yeah.
you soon.
Okay. Bye.